Everyone thinks they know Pennsylvania, the Liberty Bell, Amish country, Philly cheesesteak arguments, Steelers versus Eagles, forever. But Pennsylvania has been collecting secrets for a long time. A mountain with a fully operational underground city inside it, 10 miles from the Maryland border, that most Pennsylvanians have driven past without knowing it exists. A town where a trash fire in 1962 became an underground coal inferno that is still burning right now and will keep burning for another 250 years. An asylum that the state called a model institution that housed 10,000 people over 80 years in conditions a U.S. Supreme Court justice compared to Jim Crow. And a highway buried on purpose in April 2020 because the owner got tired of people trespassing to see it. A road that now sits under several feet of fill, above a fire that can open the ground without warning and fill a basement with carbon monoxide. 12 places. Some are off limits by federal law, some by physics, some because what happened there is the kind of thing that doesn't get a historical marker right away. Let's go. Number 12. Raven Rock Mountain Complex, Adams County. 10 miles east of Waynesboro, just north of the Maryland state line, there is a mountain with razor wire around it, antenna masts on the summit, and a sign at the main gate that reads Raven Rock Mountain Complex, Site R. The sign is not decorative. Inside that mountain is a city, not a metaphor. An actual functioning underground city blasted out of greenstone granite starting in January 1951 after President Truman watched the Soviets detonate their first nuclear weapon and decided the Pentagon needed a backup that could survive being destroyed. Construction crews excavated 500,000 cubic yards of rock in 10 months. Inside the resulting cavern stand 5 freestanding 3-story buildings, structures that look like ordinary office buildings, because that is what they are, except they are inside a mountain. The complex has its own water reservoirs, dual power plants, a hospital, a dental clinic, a chapel, and enough beds for 3,000 high-ranking defense officials. The blast doors are rated to withstand direct nuclear overpressure. The buildings inside sit on springs to absorb the shockwave. The locals call it the Underground Pentagon. The local press came up with that nickname 70 years ago, and it stuck, because it is accurate. The place functions as an alternate command center for the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps. It has been used in an actual emergency exactly once. On September 11, 2001, Dick Cheney and senior Department of Defense officials were evacuated there after the Pentagon was attacked. Cheney ran his office from inside the mountain for several days. The woman who has lived in the farmhouse in its shadow for 56 years told a reporter she knows almost nothing about it. She said, "I know there is an antenna on top of the mountain. That is as close as any of us are getting." Number 11. Pennhurst State School and Hospital, Spring City. The official name when it opened in 1908 was the Eastern Pennsylvania Institution for the Feeble-Minded and Epileptic. The name alone tells you how the era thought about the people sent there. Over 80 years, more than 10,000 individuals passed through Pennhurst. Designed for 500 residents, it was overcrowded within 4 years of opening. By its peak, it held 3,500 people in conditions that a federal judge would eventually find violated the First, Eighth, and 14th Amendments to the United States Constitution simultaneously. In 1968, Philadelphia television reporter Bill Baldini spent time inside and broadcast what he found. The series was called Suffer the Little Children. It showed half-clothed residents wandering aimlessly, adult-sized cribs with leather restraints, and staff so overwhelmed that meaningful care had become theoretical. The institution spent less per day feeding residents than the Philadelphia Zoo spent feeding its animals. One newspaper called it the shame of Pennsylvania. The state continued operating it for another 19 years. Pennhurst finally closed in 1987, 13 years after the first federal lawsuit was filed on behalf of residents. In 1985, United States Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall wrote that the conditions at places like Pennhurst rivaled, in virulence and bigotry, the worst features of Jim Crow. What remained after closure was a 1,400-acre campus in Chester County, with wheelchairs still in the hallways, adult-sized cribs still in the wards, and toys on floors covered in decades of grime. Urban explorers came in large numbers. Portions were vandalized. Portions burned. A developer bought the property and in 2010 opened the Pennhurst Asylum haunted attraction. It has been controversial ever since, for reasons that require no explanation. Some of the original buildings are still standing. Daytime history tours and overnight paranormal investigations are now available. You can pay to walk the wards of a place that held 10,000 people in conditions the Supreme Court called unconstitutional. Whether you should is a different question. Number 10. Centralia, Columbia County. On May 27, 1962, 5 members of the Centralia Volunteer Fire Company set the town landfill on fire. They had done it before. Clean up before Memorial Day, burn the trash, hose it down, done. This time, at the bottom of the pit, hidden under the garbage, was a hole in the wall of an abandoned coal seam. The fire found it. The fire is still burning. It is now 63 years in. It burns at depths of up to 300 feet, and it covers roughly 400 acres underground. It spreads along 4 separate fronts. It has consumed enough fuel to keep going for an estimated 250 more years. It reaches temperatures exceeding 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It emits carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, and methane through cracks in the surface that open without warning. Centralia had 1,400 residents in 1962. Today, fewer than 5 people live there. Congress appropriated $42 million to relocate anyone who wanted to leave. 500 buildings were demolished. The state invoked eminent domain in 1992. The U.S. Postal Service discontinued Centralia's zip code in 2002. In 2013, the last holdouts, fewer than 10 people, won the legal right to stay until they die, after which the state takes their properties. In 1981, a 12-year-old named Todd Domboski was walking through a neighbor's backyard when the ground opened beneath him. He fell into a steaming sinkhole 4 feet wide and 150 feet deep. He grabbed a tree root, and his 14-year-old cousin pulled him out. The steam contained lethal levels of carbon monoxide. Todd Domboski died in 2022 of an overdose, having lived with post-traumatic stress disorder from the incident for 40 years. The streets of Centralia are still there, empty, cracked, leading nowhere. Steam vents dot the landscape. A cemetery sits on the hill above town. The church is still holding Sunday services. The fire is still burning beneath all of it. 60 miles north of Pittsburgh, in the rural Butler County community of Boyers, there is a former limestone mine that now functions as one of the most secure storage facilities on the planet. You will not get in without an appointment, a background check, and a genuinely compelling reason to be there. United States Steel excavated limestone here from 1902 to 1952. When United States Steel left, National Underground Storage moved in. The mine had something rare, a stable temperature of 58 degrees year-round, natural humidity control, and 20 feet of limestone above impermeable shale, naturally blast-resistant and climate-controlled without expensive infrastructure. Iron Mountain acquired the operation in 1998 for $30 million. Today, the facility is 1.8 million square feet underground. It covers 315 acres of subterranean space, 220 feet below the surface. The streets inside the mine have names. There are traffic signs. Shuttle buses run through the tunnels. What is stored there? The U.S. Office of Personnel Management keeps federal employee retirement records and security clearance files there. The IRS stores records there. Major media companies also use the vaults, including Warner Brothers, Universal Music Group, and Sony. The facility holds the original master recordings of Frank Sinatra, the Corby's photographic collection, once owned by Bill Gates and now part of Getty Images, and the memorabilia left at the Flight 93 crash site in Shanksville. The facility has never had a verified security breach. Armed guards and biometric access protect it, and it is inside a mountain that most drivers on Route 8 have no idea contains any of this. If you do not have a vault, you do not have a reason to be there. They will tell you this directly. Eastern State Penitentiary is open for tours, most of it. The sections visitors walk through are the stable parts, the cell blocks where the floors are solid and the ceiling has stopped moving. Large portions of the complex are closed because they are structurally dangerous, and the difference between a guided tour and the inaccessible zones is essentially the difference between survivable and not. The prison opened in 1829 as the most expensive building in the United States at the time. Its operating philosophy, complete silence and total isolation, meant to force moral reflection, mostly produced severe mental illness among inmates forced to endure it. Al Capone spent 7 months here. Bank robber Willie Sutton escaped through a hand-dug tunnel in April 1945. He was recaptured the same day on a Philadelphia street. The prison closed in 1971, sat completely empty for 20 years, and reopened for organized tours in 1994. It is maintained as a preserved ruin, with crumbling paint, collapsed ceilings, and failing walls kept exactly as they are because that is the point. The sections behind the barriers include cell blocks where the roof has come down and the floor has gone with it. The walls in those sections are not stable. The structure is not predictable. The tours operate in the portions where a human being can reasonably expect to stay alive. Everything on the other side of those barriers is inaccessible. The physical state of those sections makes trespassing into them not forbidden so much as genuinely stupid. Number 7. The abandoned Pennsylvania Turnpike tunnels, Bedford and Fulton counties. The original Pennsylvania Turnpike, which opened in 1940, ran through 7 mountain tunnels. The 4-lane highway narrowed to 2 lanes inside each tunnel, and by the 1950s, 5-mile backups were routine on summer weekends. The state eventually bypassed 3 of the tunnels. The Sidling Hill and Rays Hill tunnels, along with 13 miles of roadway between them, were officially abandoned on November 26, 1968. The tunnels are still there. The road through them is still there. For decades, they sat in legal limbo, owned by the Turnpike Commission, inaccessible, a 13-mile stretch of mid-century highway that time stopped touching in 1968. In 2001, the Pennsylvania Turnpike Commission sold the entire stretch for $1 to the Southern Alleghenies Conservancy. It is now managed as a trail corridor. The tunnels themselves are gated. Access is controlled. Unauthorized entry remains prohibited. The Sidling Hill Tunnel is 6,782 feet long, over 1.25 miles. Inside it is completely dark within about 30 seconds of entry. Stalactites have formed on the ceilings from decades of seeping groundwater. The walls are covered in graffiti from everyone who has found a way in. The 2009 film The Road, starring Viggo Mortensen, was filmed at Rays Hill Tunnel because the location required no modification to look like the aftermath of civilization's collapse. They showed up, pointed a camera, and it was ready. In March 1942, 3 months after Pearl Harbor, the War Department called a town meeting in Elvira, Pennsylvania. They told the 400 residents, farmers whose families had worked that land for generations, that the government was taking all of it. 8,500 acres were seized by eminent domain. The residents were told they could buy their land back after the war. The government built the Pennsylvania Ordnance Works, a $50 million TNT production complex employing over 10,000 construction workers. It reached peak production of 360,000 pounds of TNT per day. It operated for less than a year. The Manhattan Project had made large-scale conventional TNT manufacturing largely redundant. The plant closed in early 1944. The residents were never allowed to buy their land back. The promise made at the 1942 town meeting was simply not kept. A declassified Department of Energy memo later confirmed that approximately 100,000 pounds of uranium metal turnings, radioactive waste from the Manhattan Project, had been stored in 4 of the facility's igloo bunkers during 1943 and 1944. The farming families who had worked that land for generations were never told. The land was divided between a federal prison complex, a state college campus, a golf course, and the Pennsylvania Game Commission. 149 concrete dome-shaped munitions bunkers remain scattered across state game lands, 252 gradually being swallowed by the forest. The Allenwood Church that once served the community of Elvira now sits inside the federal prison perimeter. It functions as a chapel for inmates. The cemetery is accessible only to family members of those buried there. Number 5. SCI Greene, Waynesburg, Greene County. The State Correctional Institution at Greene, in the far southwestern corner of Pennsylvania near the West Virginia border, is a maximum security supermax prison. It is not a place the public visits. That is not how supermax facilities work. SCI Greene was built on a 128-acre site known as the Allison Tract. Construction broke ground in 1991, and it received its first inmates in January 1994. For years, it housed approximately 80% of Pennsylvania's death row population. At its peak in the mid-2000s, roughly 800 men were held under near-total solitary confinement, 23 hours per day in a cell, 1 hour in a concrete exercise cage, no direct contact visits. In 2019, a settlement with the ACLU ended that policy. Pennsylvania has executed exactly 3 people since 1976. All 3 were under Governor Tom Ridge. All 3 had voluntarily dropped their appeals. The most recent was in 1999. There has been a moratorium on executions in the state since 2015. Pennsylvania currently has more than 100 people on death row. It has executed almost none of them. This creates a particular kind of permanent limbo that SCI Greene manages around the clock, every day, with no end in sight. If you drive to the gate without approved attorney credentials, family visitation approval, or a vendor contract, the conversation will be short. Number 4. Byberry State Hospital in Northeast Philadelphia. Byberry, officially the Philadelphia State Hospital, closed in 1990 after 84 years of operation. For roughly 2 decades after that, the campus sat completely abandoned in a northeastern Philadelphia residential neighborhood with almost no security. Trespassing was technically illegal the entire time, but enforcement was inconsistent. Byberry became one of the most documented abandoned facilities in the United States. At its peak in the 1950s, Byberry held approximately 6,000 patients, more than double its designed capacity. In 1946, a conscientious objector who had worked there as an attendant published an exposé in Life magazine. He described naked patients locked in rooms, patients chained to walls, and conditions he compared to Nazi concentration camps. What distinguished Byberry from other institutions was its tunnel system, an underground corridor network connecting buildings across the entire campus, used to move patients between facilities without exposing them to the outdoors. The tunnel existed because the institution conceptualized its residents as people who should not be seen outside. That architectural decision, preserved in concrete beneath the ground, said something about what the state believed it was doing there. Most of the buildings were demolished between 2006 and 2013. The land is now a residential neighborhood. Nothing visible above ground indicates what stood there for most of the 20th century. The tunnels may or may not still exist in some form beneath the new development. Attempting to find out would mean trespassing on private residential property. The houses built above them have no idea what is underneath them, which is very much in keeping with how Byberry operated for 84 years. Number 3. 3 Mile Island, Dauphin County. 3 Mile Island sits in the Susquehanna River about 10 miles southeast of Harrisburg. It is technically no longer an active nuclear power plant. That may be changing. On March 28, 1979, equipment failure and a series of human errors triggered the worst nuclear accident in U.S. commercial history. A partial meltdown occurred. Radioactive gases and iodine were released into the environment. Pennsylvania's governor recommended that pregnant women and preschool-aged children within 5 miles evacuate. President Jimmy Carter personally visited the site on April 1, 1979, partly to assess the situation and partly to demonstrate that standing near 3 Mile Island was not immediately fatal, which was a message the public genuinely needed at the time. Unit 2 never operated again. Its partially melted reactor core was removed in the late 1990s. Unit 1 continued generating power until September 2019. In September 2024, Constellation Energy announced a $1.6 billion plan to restart Unit 1, renamed the Crane Clean Energy Center, to supply power to Microsoft under a 20-year agreement. Restart is projected for 2028. A permanent U.S. Coast Guard security zone surrounds the island and the water around it. No unauthorized vessels may approach. No unauthorized personnel may access the facility grounds. The distinctive cooling towers, which by the way were never actually used for nuclear cooling, were part of Unit 2's condenser system and are still there, visible for miles across the Susquehanna River. They still mark a stretch of Pennsylvania that changed the course of American energy policy in a single afternoon in 1979. Number 2. Centralia's Graffiti Highway, buried. This deserves its own entry because what happened to it has a particular kind of finality. After the underground fire buckled and cracked the surface of Pennsylvania Route 61 through Centralia, the road was closed to traffic in 1993. For the next 27 years, it sat there, cracked, warm to the touch in places, steam rising from fissures in the asphalt. The tarmac heaved and split by heat below. Artists and visitors covered every inch of it in graffiti. Political messages, personal declarations, murals. It became, ironically, one of the most documented stretches of pavement in Pennsylvania. By 2020, the volume of trespassers, including vehicles, had become unmanageable for the private landowner controlling the property. In April 2020, over a single weekend, contractors buried the entire road under several feet of fill. Graffiti Highway was gone by Monday morning. People still come. They still trespass on the land above it. Police are still issuing citations. The ground above the buried highway is private property, posted no trespassing, sitting above an underground coal fire that emits carbon monoxide through surface cracks and that already swallowed a 12-year-old boy in 1981. The warnings are not metaphorical. There is nothing to see. The road is gone. Number 1. Raven Rock's neighbor, the government you don't know about. Raven Rock is the one everyone's heard of. But the full picture of what the United States government built in and around the Pennsylvania and Maryland border is larger than a single mountain. Within a few miles of Site R is Camp David, the presidential retreat. 6 miles south is Fort Ritchie, a decommissioned Army installation that served as a supplemental facility to Raven Rock throughout the Cold War and housed its own classified operations for decades. Nearby, a series of smaller continuity of government facilities, most of which have never been publicly identified, were built into the same Blue Ridge mountain range, connected by roads that do not appear on commercial maps and secured by fences that most drivers on Route 16 assume belong to private landowners. The full network of what was built in this corner of Pennsylvania during the Cold War has never been completely disclosed. The Freedom of Information Act requests that have produced partial answers over the decades have generated documents with substantial redactions. Journalists who have spent years on it describe finding facilities that do not appear in any public record, staff who do not acknowledge employment at any identifiable organization, and infrastructure that was built, expanded, and apparently maintained without any public procurement record. The mountain is 10 miles east of Waynesboro. The antenna masts are visible from the road. The razor wire is real. And the neighbor who has lived there 56 years and knows nothing about it is, in this particular case, exactly the point. Pennsylvania doesn't advertise what it's keeping. From a burning town with no zip code, to an underground Pentagon with no visitors, from an asylum that became a haunted house, to a highway that got buried to stop the questions. The state has a long history of deciding certain things are better left alone.